Hello and welcome to Faith, Friends, and Leadership. Today, we're joined by Ryan Allen, a high performance coach and president behind the 10-year letter framework. Ryan's journey we're going to hear from today is from high stakes sales career to becoming an assistant in real estate, all in the name of being a better mother, led her to this profound realization. Most leaders are trying to drive their lives without knowing who's actually in the driver's seat. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Zach.
Absolutely. So we were talking off air about this, and then my camera broke. But we were discussing how we've known each other, I think like it's 6, 7, might even be 8 years. We got into coaching together through Keller Williams.
Yep, at the exact same time in the exact same training class.
Yeah, it's a wild ride that was. Well, I'm excited for the conversation to hear what you're up to. So to get us started, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey from high travel sales career to the world of real estate and coaching, and now
Yeah,
president of the 10-year letter.
thank you so much. Well, I am a wife and a mom of three. I have a 12, 10, and 9-year-old. So we are super busy in our personal lives. My husband and I run a real estate team and real estate investing. And I actually got into this world right after I had my son. So my entire career, I did sales. I traveled every week, every weekend, lived out of a suitcase starting at the age of 20 until right after, like I said, after I had my son in 2014. And I was gone all the time. I was at late night dinners. I was carrying my laptop around with me everywhere I went, constantly working. And after I had my son, I realized that I didn't want to do that anymore. It didn't really fit into this new world that I was obsessed with in being a mom. And so I wanted to be home by the time it was ready to make dinner and hang out with him. I found myself rushing home at the end of the day to be able to be with him. And that is where I found my way into real estate. So I had never even purchased a home with a real estate agent. I knew nothing about it. I just knew that a friend of mine had this job that was open as a real estate assistant to a single agent, and the skills and the qualifications matched what I could do. And so I took this job, pretty large pay cut. And what's funny looking back now is when I was interviewed, my sticking point was I wanted a 401k. Looking back now, like, how silly was that? But I came from corporate America, right? That was the negotiating factor. And
Yeah.
so I started working for him, and supporting his team administrationally, and took care of all of his files, his database, marketing. And what I quickly realized was I was made for more, right? No matter how much that I tried to slow my pace or take a job that was easier, right? I could do it in my sleep. I wasn't actually fulfilled. And I found myself in our office of real estate agents, our market center, being the go-to for all the questions, whether it was organizationally, the things that I was learning, new ideas and ways to work in your database or hire people or teaching classes, things like that. I became the go-to in helping people simplify their problems. And as you know, entrepreneurs like to overcomplicate things. And so there's definitely a need for those that have the talent of simplifying things. And it was at that time I was helping that agent grow his business, grew the team really quickly, started a transaction management company. I had my hands in a little bit of all of the areas of the real estate business. And there was an event that I was sponsoring, and
Okay.
a seasoned coach with the coaching company that we were with came up to me and said, "Have you ever thought about coaching?" And I was like, I thought he meant he wanted me to hire a coach. And so, of course, I didn't want to be sold. I don't like to be sold. I've been a salesperson forever. And I said, "Oh, no, 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 no. I'm okay. We're doing good." And he said, "No. Have you ever thought about being a coach?" Honestly, my first thought was, I am extremely underqualified. What do I know? I'm in my section of Indiana doing really well there. But what do I know about leading other people or coaching other people? And so that's where we actually met. I jumped in and flew to Austin, Texas. We took the class of how to become a coach. And I realized that I actually was already equipped with the skill set. I just needed some refinement, the models and the systems to follow. And since then, I have been coaching professionally in all areas of real estate and even outside businesses, and helping entrepreneurs take their overcomplicated ideas or obstacles and really simplify them down to then tackle them one piece at a time.
Yeah, well said. The is so precise in the way you coach, who you coach, and I think oftentimes when we hear entrepreneurs, right, we always think of like the high D, fast pace, like unorganized. And the reality of it is, I like highlighting and pointing out that even for those of us who maybe are more organized, more like C's, more introverted, we overcomplicate just as much as a high D, right? So for the vagueness that is a high powered, all out entrepreneur, there is over detail and complications that can come from an operations person, right? Who looks at it and
100%.
everything's in a system. And we have the same tendency to add on so many steps and so many processes that it can be just as complicated. So I love the fact that your simplification of what you're coaching to their core and then how you go about that to make sure they get what they want is it's a needed thing on all spectrums, all sides.
Yeah. And they've always said coaching is just holding up a mirror for someone. And I think by asking the right questions at the right time to the right person, it gives them an environment to work through it and realize, oh wait, there's a simpler solution, or there's a faster solution, or a more profitable solution, and it's just giving them that space to do so, where I think a lot of us, we can get lost in our own minds, or previous things, right? If it's not broke, don't fix it. Yes, and we can make it a lot simpler.
Yep, absolutely. Well, one of the things we talked about was kind of your true first domino, but you realize through your journey and through faith and in business world that often prioritize logic and analytics that you know, the question came up is how do you coach leaders to bridge the gap and align their professional goals with maybe their spiritual identity, or if they're not spiritual, just with their identity in general, right? If they're a mom or dad, whatever that may be.
Yeah. Well, and our identity is who we are. If we were to remove every title and every role, even mom or dad or boss or sister or friend, we were to strip all that away. It's who you are at your core. And I firmly believe that we are all cogs in the wheel, right? You and I met at a very specific time, and we may not know that greater plan. And the moment we were put on this earth, it is for a purpose, and people spend a long, long time, sometimes too long, trying to figure out what that purpose is, and most likely overcomplicating it. Because I think every aspect of our life, right? If I were to look back over my life, the moments that stick out are honestly when I failed at something, or when I really screwed something up, and the lesson that I learned from it. And every one of those pieces has been layered together for my purpose of what I believe why I was put on this earth, right? I was given the gift of communication, right? As a kid in school, my teachers didn't see that as a gift, but I do now.
Yeah.
Of truly seeing people and reading people and not being afraid to ask hard questions. And all of those things all of those skills that I've obtained over my life, that I think was all just refining me and sharpening me to make an impact on the world for the better. And so I think we all have a purpose, and they all fit together somehow, even if we don't know the greater vision and God's greater vision for us. But once you find that purpose and you figure out what skills you already have that equipped you to fulfill that purpose, you can't help but just sprint.
So true. Well, in 2021, you described to me that your world fell apart. And shortly after that, you wrote your first kind of like identity letter or your first 10-year letter, and you described it as a season of finally stepping out of the driver's seat. What did that season of surrender teach you about the illusion of control that we've been talking about so far and so many ambitious leaders struggle with?
Yeah. Well, so in September of 2021, I had just gotten married. And right at the beginning of November of that same year, so a few short weeks later, 6 weeks later, my coach at the time challenged me to write a letter to myself into the future, 10 years into the future. And at the time, there wasn't really much framework other than, hey, go write this letter and make sure you mention all the parts of your world. And so I got to work, and you and I are probably both wired this way. I had it on my calendar every day of how long I was going to work on it and what parts of the letter I was going to construct. And I put a lot of time and effort into it. And I wrote that letter, and the following week, I was challenged to then read it in front of a group of people. Now, for someone with the gift of gab, that was probably one of the most vulnerable things I had ever done. And in front of a group of essentially strangers, people I didn't know on a deep level, sharing the innermost parts of my heart and what I wanted my faith to look like, and the relationship with my kids and the work that I did and the people that I impacted. And I wrote that letter, and part of it said that I was going to be building my dream home, right? Out by where my kid's dad lived. And we were going to have room for activities. It was going to be near my kid's school. And 3 days later, after I wrote that letter, we found property off market, under market value, and bought the land. Right. So I'm shouting this from the rooftop. Guys, this works. I wrote it on a letter and it happened.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, I prayed about it a lot too. And so that was my testimony around the letter for the longest time. And if you remember me saying that the biggest lessons in my life, and I think in a lot of people's lives, have happened when there is failure or there is struggle or there is an obstacle, right? Those are the moments that we remember and we take away. And one of the largest struggles in my life actually happened 3 weeks after I wrote the letter. And I found myself at one of the lowest points that I have in my life. And it was a moment that everybody has probably found themselves there, right? The situations might be different, but I found myself crying in the shower floor, completely frozen, unable to move, was sitting there so long that I could still to this day tell you the tile pattern of the shower floor. Right, the water started turning cold, and I remember thinking at that moment, one, who am I? Who was I made to be, and what is my purpose here? I asked myself, am I somebody who quits when things get hard? Am I somebody who gives up? And are the things that I wrote in my letter still true? And the answer to that one was yes. And no, I'm not somebody who gives up or quits. If anybody knows me, they're like, she's almost on the opposite end of the spectrum. She's so stubborn. She's going to figure out how to make it happen. And the second layer to it was, how would I feel if my daughter walked in and saw me right now? Right? My daughter thought I was a superhero. Take it to mom, she'll know what to do. Everything I did, she mirrored. And I asked, is this who I want my daughter to see? And the answer was no. And so I got up, and from that moment forward and thinking about it, that's not who God put me on this earth to be. Every struggle, every trauma, every situation, every yes, every no was refining this person. And looking back, I'm grateful for that moment, one, because I didn't realize how much of an anchor this letter was, right? Finding the land, that's great. But everybody has their sitting in a shower floor moment. And two, I realized I am no longer in the driver's seat. I can make a plan detailed out. I can schedule my week, my month, my next 10 years. I can say, this is what I want to do with my life. And ultimately, I'm not in control. Now I can share the desires of my heart and I can pray around them and ask for the discernment to know which direction to go.
Right.
But the longer I try to white knuckle the steering wheel, the worse it's actually making it. And so what I wrote in that letter was still true. I just kind of got off the beaten path a little bit and had to find my way back. And ever since then, when I look back at that moment and the second that I decided to just release the steering wheel and say, that's still what I want, that's still what I'm fighting for, no matter what the individual daily circumstances are, that's who I am because I wrote it from the vantage point of my identity, not frivolous things, not money, the things that I actually had control over. And the things that if I didn't have control over, I knew who to give them to, I'm sorry, and when to release the control, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the framework you described me, it's so powerful because we know prayer, journaling and meditating on what your prayer, right? That the spirit's going to intercede on your behalf and things like that. So when you're writing your letter and you're focused on that and you're meaningful, when it fits in for the will that God would have for you, and his purposes in alignment with the values, the biblical beliefs, um, you will start to work through that journey. You'll start to be refined, as you said, and you'll start to be molded in the person that looks a lot like what you've been praying about, journaling and going through. And I'm sure there's a lot of lessons too, right? There's some things that maybe change, differ, or look at it. But I love the picture that you're painting of you can lay it at Jesus' feet. You just got to let go of it once you lay it down, right? You got to let go of the wheel. You just cannot hold on to the wheel. It just doesn't work like that. It's still a control issue, and you haven't surrendered at that.
Right. Well, and a piece that I wrote in my letter was I was teaching, leading, and impacting other people, right? I didn't write what company I was with or what my title was, or I just knew that that's who I was made to be. I was able to pair that with the shower floor moment because every struggle or obstacle I have learned the biggest life lesson through. And if I can shift my mindset around having gratitude, because now I can talk about it and now I can share it with other people and impact other people and help other people, then anything that happens, it's not earth shattering. It's just adding another tool to my tool belt, right? It's, oh, we're having struggles in parenting or in marriage or in the business. Well, let's figure this out so that we can apply it and help somebody else with it.
Well, your 10-year letter framework leverages the science of, was it episodic future thinking? Is that what you said?
Episodic future thinking. Yep.
Episodic. Okay. Man, I was so close. Episodic future thinking. I had it in my notes. Can you explain how this process convinces the brain that a future vision is true? And why is the act of vulnerability and sharing the letter so critical for leadership accountability? And I know you covered that, but I just want to catch
Yep.
that again.
Yeah. So after I wrote my letter, I started sharing it with other people. And Craig Zuber, who is the author of the 10-year letter book that will be out at the beginning of this summer, he
Awesome.
was sharing it with lots of people. And we knew that it worked, but he was challenged by Gary Keller and said, we know it works, but why does it work? And so, through the research and kind of reverse engineering it, what was found was that there are four reasons that this works, and it's neuroscience. And one of those is called episodic future thinking. So, if you were to look back in your life, Zach, for instance, would you agree that the moments that you have memory around, right? So your childhood to now, the moments that have stuck with you long term, there was an emotion evoked, whether good, happy, excited, or bad, sad, traumatic. Would you agree that those are the ones that have stuck in your head?
Absolutely.
The in between's probably pretty fuzzy. You
Right.
can't tell
Yeah.
me what you had June 5th, 1992 for lunch. But if later that afternoon you broke your arm, you probably remember that day and time very well. And so, if our memories, the things that stick with us, that our brain says these were true, are triggered by emotion, then would it not also make sense that if we could replicate that, but in reverse, with forward thinking into the future, that our brains would also tell us that it's true. And so, working through the framework of now the 10-year letter workshop, right? Because I was just told, hey, go write a letter. We now have made it a paint by number. We create a future so vivid that your brain sees it as factual, that it's already happened. And so your letter doesn't become a checklist of tasks to check off. It becomes a force that pulls you forward. You can't help but nail it. And so when tapping into the science, that's why we keep getting the results that we do, because people are so clear. Their decisions become easier, their relationships become clearer, their decisions professionally and personally become easier. And you can't help but go through and absolutely nail it because your brain says, well, we've already done it. We're crystal clear on what we're actually fighting for. And then when you layer on at the end of our workshops, we challenge you to read your letter out loud and something shifts, right? It's not just words on a page. You are putting them into the universe. And there's been very few people that read their letters out loud and don't cry because it truly means something, right? It's not a business plan you're standing up to read. It's what you want your life to look like 10 years from now. And it creates this community and it creates this level of accountability that everybody else in the room knows what you're fighting for. Now you got to nail it. You got a room
Yeah.
full of people that are expecting you to do so, right? So it's one of the deepest exercises I've ever done, the most impactful thing I've ever witnessed in a room full of people. And I can't help but share it, right? That's part of my vision and I would share it whether I was involved with this or not.
Well, we appreciate you sharing and coming on, telling us a little bit about your story and testimony and going up through it. I'm excited for the audience and our community to check it out. The details will be in the show notes so you can look up all that Ryan's up to. You can look into their workshops when those will be happening. And then, two, it sounds like book will be released this summer. So, at some point, so we'll be able to check that out and go through. So, thank you
Well,
so
Zach,
much.
if I could interrupt you for a minute,
Yeah,
I have also been given the green light to share with you to put in the notes a link that it is now available for pre-order.
nice. Go ahead. All
So
right. So just tell us a
I've
little bit
been
about, so
given
can
the
we go
green
to
light to share
Amazon
that.
or is it just a website link?
Yep. It'll be through the publisher's website to do the pre-orders.
That's awesome. Okay. So you heard it there. So we'll make sure we get that in the notes so you'll actually be able to pre-order the book, which is cool. So thank you for interrupting me on that.
You're very welcome.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, until next time, keep living a life of faith, building up your friends, and embracing the journey. God bless everybody.